Christine Zaganko, her young daughter and father John Harrison were sitting on the veranda of their Taylor's Beach house west of Nelson Bay.
Well, we were upstairs and we were drinking coffee and we were sort of having a bit of a chat. We noticed out in the water that there was people swimming, and I just sort of thought it's funny to be swimming. The water's so cold. And it wasn't until we sort of got the binoculars and had a look we realised that they were in trouble. One of them started waving then.
Christine and John raced downstairs, grabbed a neighbour's boat and rowed 100 metres to the small craft in distress. Taylor's Beach is a popular boating and fishing area. The three men had spent the afternoon cruising in this small motorboat before coming ashore in a 2-metre dinghy. The craft capsized and the men were quickly carried by a strong current 100 metres away from the motorboat. Two of the men, Philip Lake and Harry Myers, both in their 60s, were picked up minutes later by Christine and her father and taken to land suffering hypothermia from the cold waters. With two of the men safe, Christine and John took the rowboat back into the water to try and find the third. But after searching for 3/4 of an hour in failing light and against a strong tide, their efforts were unrewarded. The Nelson Bay Water Police, aided with searchlights from the rescue helicopter, continued to look for the missing man. In the dark, they found him face down a kilometre north of Taylor's Beach.
And about 300 metres off Mud Point, we located a dinghy. And with the aid of Westpac 3, we got that dinghy on board. And we then proceeded south from that point and located the deceased in the water.
There was praise today for Christine Zaganko and her father, who through their life-saving work lessened a tragedy which could have been dramatically worse.
They were really cold and they were exhausted, they'd just hung on to their end. I'd say another 5 minutes and they would have been, I would have been 3 casualties.
Today's tour began with a city bus ride before a trip around the harbour on the William IV. The tour was planned to demonstrate how a thriving industrial city can still be an attractive tourist haven, the importance of Newcastle business to Australia's foreign exchange earnings, and the growth and quality of the local wine industry. The fact-finding trip for journalists from the London Times, Radio Beijing, Dow Jones News Service and American Newsweek included lengthy stopovers at local wineries. Staff correspondent for the Asian Wall Street Journal, Corrine Witcher, says Novocastrians can be assured the city will receive big raps.
I think everybody's been very favourably impressed. People have been very friendly and the food's been good and the wine's been great.
The engineers faculty of the Newcastle University today opened their doors to display their new $8 million building and equipment. Most interest for the day centred around this numerically controlled milling machine that can take a computer design and machine a piece of metal into a working part. Computer-aided design allowing 3D construction, technical systems to assist assembly robots also drew plenty of interest. Meanwhile, at the Mater Hospital, open day in the obstetrics section also drew large crowds. The open day is designed to give all the latest information on pre, post and antenatal services. The display included working models of humidicribs, and nursing sisters were only too happy to explain what happens to a woman's body during pregnancy and birth. One family that didn't need to attend today's open day, Newsnight presenter John Church and his wife Lynn. On Friday afternoon, Mrs Church delivered 3,030-gram Catherine Gay Church at the Mater Hospital. Catherine is the first child for the Churches, and Father John couldn't be happier. The annual street fair again attracted large crowds to the suburban heart of Newcastle. Macquarie City Council today presented the key to Knights forward James Goulding to honour the team for outstanding performances throughout the year and for being a true local success story. Throughout the fair, the streets of Cardiff were closed off and open to plenty of stalls and activities. The fair was also the farewell function for the Cardiff junior soccer side, heading off for Lake Macquarie's sister city, Round Rock, in the United States. The team will play a number of exhibition games against the Americans before returning home later in the month.
In a match that meant little to the Falcons except for pride and everything to the Kings regarding their standing in the National Basketball League, it was played in a grand final atmosphere. A turn-away capacity crowd witnessed a stunning opening burst by the home team, with Jerry Everett the superstar of early proceedings. Whether it was scoring points or grabbing rebounds, Everett dominated the first quarter. The Falcons continued to mount pressure to the Kings, and at one stage in the second stanza led by an incredible 20 points. But the Sydney Siders fought their way back into the match, with Steve Carfino playing superb basketball and Damien Keogh knocking in a couple of great three-point baskets. Ahead by 7 at half-time, the Falcons kept a steady head and stayed with the Kings. Jones was having a blinder for the Falcons and, surprisingly, dominated the boards, an area many thought was the Kings' strength. Still ahead at the last change, the home side allowed the Kings to get back to 2 points, but then again the Falcons kicked away. With a huge crowd urging them on, the Falcons turned back the Kings at every post to notch another amazing victory over a team that's in this year's playoffs. The final score, the Newcastle Falcons 102 defeated the Sydney Kings 97.
Competition among school leavers for apprenticeship positions is getting tougher. Now, the Apprentice Training Officers Association admits it's aware of reports of alleged substitution rackets where applicants pay brighter, more senior school students to sit aptitude exams for them. Newcastle Training Officers President Paul Mulvaney says there's no system to detect cheats.
We have no real mechanism to check cheating. Exam papers have to be signed, but checking them back would be a fairly difficult task. So the detection wouldn't come about in the exam, but possibly when we are doing our cross-referencing, if there was an excellent exam result and it wasn't backed up by the school marks, then it would raise alarm bells and we would wonder why.
A keen applicant could sit for up to a dozen aptitude exams as well as studying for a school certificate. It could be that the substitute isn't being used to improve the applicant's result, but simply to ensure that the student is represented at the entrance exam. In any case, Paul Mulvaney says successful apprentices still face a 3-month probation period, which would lead to an early career change for an exam cheat.
It's the original round-robin singles event in New South Wales and has developed into one of Australia's most prestigious events. Play got underway at 9:30 this morning, and once again the calibre of bowlers is outstanding. Heading the field are 3 bowlers who have been selected to represent Australia at next year's Commonwealth Games. Ken Woods from Queen Biana's estate, an Australian player, and will take part in the fours in Auckland as a member of the Games team. His opponent today was Rex Johnson, who will be in the same team as Ken in Auckland. Rob Perella from Queensland won the recent Pacific Championship singles and will play in that position at the Commonwealth Games. Their opposition for the Waratah tournament are brilliant bowlers also. Cameron Curtis is a young player with enormous potential and is the current national junior champion and the New South Wales singles champion of champions. Former Commonwealth Games silver medalist John Snell will make it hard for all the players, as will Terry McCabe, a very experienced representative player. Pat Barwick from the host club carries the local hopes, and Neville Day from the Grandviews club makes up the 8 players in the field. As an innovation this year, coloured clothing has been allowed, and the tournament will conclude with the final on Friday. The racing season is conducted from August to July each year, and achievements in 5 categories were acknowledged today. For the 5th year in a row, Paul Perry won the Trainers' Premiership with 79 winners, and as recent as last Saturday was in the winner's circle once again with Copper Tonic. Neil Ray ended the 5-year reign of Robert Thompson by taking the Jockeys' Premiership with 85 winners, a title Neil won in 1982-83. The performance of Scott Thurlow to win the Apprentices Award was quite amazing, as he lost his 1.5 kilo allowance and still managed to notch 23 winners to take the title. The 2-year-old of the year was won by Lucky Diamond, owned by Mr and Mrs Lamb of Sydney and trained by Judy Maynard of Broadmeadow. Lucky Diamond has had 7 starts for a win, 2 seconds and 2/3 for total prize money of $35,120. Sunalong Lass, a winner of over $102,000, was named the Horse of the Year, and it was a delighted John Hawkins who accepted the award on behalf of his wife and himself as the owners. Terry Drayton is the trainer of Sunalong Lass, and her big win was the Carrington Stakes at Randwick last January. But most of the discussion today centred around the running of the NBN Cameron Handicap tomorrow and the Newcastle Winfield Gold Cup on Wednesday. Classy sprinter Groucho has been installed the early favourite for the $100,000 event. Groucho brilliantly won the Weight for Age Warwick Stakes on August the 19th and followed up with a gutsy second to the top sprinter High Regard in the Chelmsford Stakes on September the 2nd. Smart Queenslander Don't Play and Prince Trialia will run boldly in a race which has attracted an excellent field. And Gary Harley's selections for the Daily Double are Bush Picnic to win the first leg, which is race 8, and Equal Night to win the second leg, race 9. Hope we can provide a winner or two for you.
Judging Australia's largest regional wine show is a very serious business. This mess hall at Singleton Army Base was chosen for its natural light and glass washing facilities, for a trace of tea towel could just jeopardise the chances of a top hunter wine. The sensitive noses of the 9 judges could also be affected by perfume or aftershave, and smoking is of course strictly prohibited in the vicinity of these 690 entries. But it's not all up to the noses. Litmus tests are used to check sugar content of the winning wines. 2 judges who've had the hard task of sampling wines at all 16 of the Hunter Valley wine shows are Jack Monty and this year's chairman and chief judge, Graham Gregory. Mr Gregory is Deputy Director of the New South Wales Agriculture and Fisheries Department. Judging wine, though strictly business, does have its merits.
It is a great pleasure. We've got some very, very experienced judges here, and they're very competent, and it makes my role as chairman very, very easy. I can just go around and enjoy the wines.
Entries are from 50 wineries north of Sydney, most from the Hunter Valley, and there are about 100 more than last year. This is the first year Lindeman's Wines and the Small Davis Estate have entered. And it's also the first year for a new perpetual trophy for the show's overall winners, the best red and white table wines. Also newer classes for minimum quantities of wines.
We were very surprised, really, the number that we did get in those new classes. They were put in there for people who have very small quantities of a particular wine. Largely they could be experimental wines that new varieties or new style that people wanted to try out.
Judging continues until Thursday, and the award winners will be announced at a special dinner attended by the Governor of New South Wales that night. But we did manage a sneak preview of standards today.
You know, we had a fair bit of rain last year prior to vintage. It dried up at vintage time, fortunately, and the Beaumays were good. But, you know, those wet conditions obviously did affect the Semillons to some degree, but there's still some lovely wines there. I think we're in for a really good show, some top wines.
With the tradition of the high seas, the bell tolls to call a new federal master of the Company of Master Mariners of Australia. Captain Alan Irons of Redhead has spent most of his 64 years working with ships. A master mariner is a person who can captain any seagoing vessel, and indeed Captain Irons has done that the world over. The last 17 years of his working life, he worked at the BHP, designing and developing such ships as the Iron Newcastle and Iron Pacific. The first Novocastrian president in its 51-year history, Captain Irons hopes to continue the tradition of the company, giving apolitical advice on the intricacies of the high seas.
This is Main Road 518, the major link between Madawi and Newcastle, and according to residents, it's just had a major facelift, with road crews having spent the past 2 weekends repairing the larger gaping holes. But frustrated motorists who frequent the road say the tar patching is only makeshift, and next time it rains, the potholes will reappear, probably bigger than ever. Well, the damage bill to vehicles from pieces of road like this one's been mammoth. In fact, it's so incensed people that have used the road that in just the last 10 days, they've managed to collect 1,348 signatures on this petition, protesting the state of the road and demanding something be done before the victims are more than just motor vehicles.
It takes a lot for the Madawi people to be up in arms, but they're all up in arms at the moment, and it's been the constant talking point for the last 3 weeks.
And now it seems all that effort hasn't been wasted. After the petition was presented to State Parliament yesterday, Transport Minister Baird announced plans for a $1.5 million improvement program to be carried out over the next 3 years. As well, Mr Baird is investigating the possibility of tunnelling some of the 3x3 petrol tax money into the road to expand the improvement program. Work on the road is expected to begin within a few months.
It's not scheduled for rehabilitation till 1997, and frankly the road won't last past the next rain.
Are you worried that it could end up claiming a lifestyle?
Oh, without doubt it will. It's just a matter of time.
In the first 6 hours of Operation Buckle Up, 20 Newcastle motorists were fined for not wearing seatbelts. Police concentrated on roads around schools and shopping centres, booking a large number of drivers for having children unrestrained. Sergeant Warren Bramble from the Newcastle Highway Patrol says drivers haven't taken the hint.
You've been stopped in relation to not wearing your seatbelt in your vehicle. Any reason you're not wearing it? Yeah, well... No, we expected a far greater response. Bearing in mind it's been heavily broadcast through all media and newspaper outlets.
Police say their high success rate has come from a tactic using a plainclothes officer spotting an unrestrained driver or passenger and radioing ahead to a patrol car that stops the driver. Police were also quick to point out that passengers in taxis are not exempt from wearing belts, and children are allowed to travel in a front seat as long as the belt fits firmly. In a 20-minute period we spent with police this afternoon, 5 motorists were stopped and given infringement notices. However, Sergeant Bramble says he would prefer not to hand out any.
I would like to personally see very few more, but I'm afraid that we'll probably run into 3 figures by the time the enforcement's finished.
State Environment Minister Tim Moore today announced the appointment of Paul Broad as the new Managing Director of the Hunter Water Board. Mr Broad previously managed the southern region of the board's operations, responsible for Lake Macquarie. His promotion to head office in Newcastle brings him closer to his favourite pastime, swimming at Merewether Beach, pollution and all.
With Merewether Bars there are 2 things. One is the bird outfall, which obviously in the old days polluted. The other one is the overflow point at Merewether. There's an overflow in our sewage system just beyond Merewether Bars. Now, over recent days, we've introduced changes to prevent overflows at Merewether Bars, and I keep assuring the swimmers there that this summer we'll have a clean pool all year round.
Mr Broad admits the Hunter Water Board is one of the higher cost water authorities in Australia, but he aims to end that by increasing productivity and efficiency so that water charges will fall.
Our business plan aims to reduce charges to below CPI over the next 5 years. My aim will be to continue that process, and with tight management, good control, I expect to even do better.
Okay, so the public can expect a fall in water rate charges?
Yes.
Mr Broad says he'll continue restructuring the board's operations, which includes the establishment of district offices in the region.
When you come to the water board, you don't get pushed around from one counter to the next. You go to one counter and all your problems get solved. I know that may be a little ambitious, but that's my objective.
Okay.
Mayor Marie Callaghan says the council is aware it has a big image problem. Earlier this year, the Department of Local Government held an inquiry into the council's activities and recommended that it improve communication with ratepayers. Marie Callaghan says rather than hold a public meeting where only 50 or 60 people might turn up, Council decided to mail a questionnaire to all 43,000 ratepayers, giving them a chance to voice their opinions. The survey will ask for comments on how Council can keep the public better informed about its activities. Ratepayers can assess how Council is performing and where charges should be increased or decreased. They can indicate which major issues should be addressed immediately and, if funds are limited, which could instead be cut.
A major problem with our image is when people don't understand that the council does not have sufficient money to provide all of the services that they in fact deserve. And I think people haven't understood that. We've got to get that across to them. We've got to ask them what their priorities are. We don't wish to put up rates. It's been suggested by the inquiry that we do so, but we're looking for another way. Now, perhaps if the people can suggest certain services that could be cut, maybe we can find a way of preventing those rates increases.
Ratepayers, while readily criticising the council's performance on roadworks, both in maintenance and construction, have positive thoughts about a survey.
Do you think a survey is a good idea?
I think so, yes.
I think it's a very good idea.
I think it's something that's been needed all along. And I honestly don't think that our opinion would make any difference to Cessnock Council, because they just don't seem to be able to do anything in this area, or don't want to do anything.
One plan the council has in mind is for community groups to consider an Adopt a Park program, where volunteers take care of council's many parks to keep rates down.
Perhaps we're hoping that community groups or individuals could come forward and offer to take over maybe management of some parks. Hopefully, parks is a big issue, and sporting facilities. Now, perhaps members of the public can come forward and offer some assistance, and that way less cost to council.
The idea was met with mixed enthusiasm.
I think we need something like that in Cessnock, definitely.
Well, I suppose it's a good idea if you want to help them do your parks up, but it'd be one way of getting them done, wouldn't it?
The glamour of the night before over, and Nolene Hearn was back at her desk bright and early today, doing what managers do best. Liaising with her 18 sales staff by phone takes up much of her day, as well as visiting the offices which extend from Mayfield to Muswellbrook and Port Macquarie. Nolene has had a fast rise to success. After 10 years at home looking after her 2 daughters, she began her career with the GIO 5 years ago. Though she was one of only 3 women amongst 100 men, she found no prejudice.
Oh no, not at all. In fact, sometimes it can be, not having to share facilities is often very good. No, I haven't really ever experienced any difficulty. In fact, I find that the men that I have worked with are very supportive, and we work very well as a team.
2 years ago, she was promoted to her present position as the Northern Hunters District Sales Manager of Investment Planning. Though her home has always been in Lake Macquarie, she's heavily involved in the Mayfield community where she works. She's president of the Mayfield Chamber of Commerce and a member of a local business and professional women's club. Though delighted with the prestige of her award, the cash and other prizes, she hopes her achievement will be an inspiration to aspiring young hunter women.
I think you have to be open to opportunities, and if you do your job well and enjoy yourself, I think you can achieve just about anything.